Ну, дурні. Ну, недобре.
It is stupid. It is not good. There is a powerful wind blowing from the east.
At the end of February, an image from a farmers' protest in Poland spread across social media. In it, a man can be seen driving a tractor adorned with a banner that says Putin, bring order to Ukraine, Brussels and our rulers, alongside a Soviet flag. When the photograph was released, it quickly went viral.
It got out to the world before the protest ended.
Polish media reports said police got involved by arresting and questioning the man behind it, named only as Piotr G. And a day after the image made waves online, the spokesperson for Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a statement warning of attempts to take over the country's agricultural protest movement by groups possibly under the influence of Russian agents.
The words that came from the politicians regarding this case, but also other cases that happened around the same time, were very, very strong. The Polish Prime Minister said that any cooperation in Poland with the Russian will be burned out with iron.
I'm Kayleen Devlin, and in this episode of BBC Trending, we're travelling to Poland to hear from Ukrainian truckers and Polish farmers at the heart of the country's agricultural protests. We'll try and trace the man behind the controversial banner. Who is he, and what does the reaction around this particular picture tell us about anxieties around Russian influence in Poland and beyond?
We have to be aware of one thing, that Russia considers disinformation as the military tool.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine started in February 2022, Poland has been central to Europe's response. The country has registered over 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees. Here's Grzegorz Sokol, a reporter based in Warsaw, Poland, who's been working with me on this story.
The Polish have been very supportive of Ukraine from the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And I feel that there is a clear sense that Poland and Ukraine share the same threat or the same enemy, and that is Russia. But last summer, there was a clear downturn, and the Ukrainian agriculture imports have been a part of this change in narrative that happened last summer.
That change in narrative coincided with farmers' protests, which have spread across Europe. Following Russia's invasion, the EU had allowed Ukraine tariff-free access to its markets. Polish dealers bought up cheap Ukrainian grain and stockpiled it. Polish farmers, angry about Ukrainian grain flooding the Polish market and keeping prices low, took to the streets to protest. They're also protesting what they say are restrictions placed upon them by the European Union's Green Deal plan to tackle climate change. Tens of thousands of people have taken part in protests across the country. Tractors flying Polish flags blocked motorways. Blockades were set up at several border crossings with Ukraine. Polish farmers' complaints have echoed at farmers' protests across Europe. Concerns about falling prices, rising costs, climate change, and cheap foreign imports driven, protesters say, by EU regulations. Grzegorz travelled to the Polish border with Ukraine to speak to some of the people caught up in the protests.
I'm standing with three men here in the middle of the road between two trucks, and one of them is sitting next to a small table, and he has a gas sort of camping stove, and he's frying on a frying pan, he's frying fresh meat. The three men standing here have been waiting since Monday. It's Friday today, so they expect the whole wait to be for about a week.
Grzegorz is standing at one of the main border crossings between Poland and Ukraine in Hrobenna. At the time of recording, there's a blockade. Polish farmers are occupying the crossing and only letting a few trucks a day in. Truckers stand around waiting to cross. Each side has their own idea of what's going on, and there's no communication between them.
I talked to several truckers on the Ukrainian side. I met two men. Their first impression was that this shows complete chaos on the Polish side. The trucker I was talking to was actually waiting on the Polish side to enter Ukraine. And he told me, I am carrying Polish products that Poland is selling to Ukraine. Why are they stopping me? They should be stopping, if they want to stop grain, they should be stopping grain coming in. This is chaos. When I tried to dig deeper and ask more questions, it didn't take long until they began talking about how eventually they believe that it's all controlled by Russia.
teraz pomyślisz, kto to finansuje?
Who's behind it? Putin. Not all of the stories they told me made immediate sense to me, but it seemed like there was a clear sense of someone standing behind it. There was a sense that behind it is Russia and that we're all just pawns in the game. So that's a widespread opinion among the Ukrainian truckers, even if they don't understand exactly the specifics. I told them, do you understand what the Polish farmers are protesting about? Etc. Many of them didn't. Not exactly.
Tak, na 100%.
We wanted to find Pyotr, the man behind the pro-Putin banner. When I did a reverse image search on the image of the tractor brandishing the pro-Putin banner to find where it had appeared online, I found lots of both pro and anti-Russian messaging around it across multiple platforms, including websites, Telegram, Facebook, X, and VKontakte. The Russian state-owned news agency Sputnik quoted a far-right Polish politician claiming that the image reflected the extreme fatigue of ordinary Poles who are quote-unquote tired of state media narratives and slogans related to Poland's unconditional support for Ukraine. Another site based out of Russia, runovosti.com, posted the image with the headline, "Protests in Poland intensify. People demand exit from the EU." On Telegram, the former Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs for Ukraine posted the picture, insinuating possible Russian influence. Do you still have doubts about who is the organiser and ideological inspirer of these protests on the border between Poland and Ukraine, he wrote. Poland's Interior Minister, Marcin Kierwiński, tweeted shortly after that the scandalous banner was immediately removed and secured by the Polish police. The police and prosecutor's office are taking action against its author, he posted.
The very fact that he was charged did not come as a surprise to me, given the climate surrounding, the current situation with Russia's full-scale invasion and Ukraine being our neighbor.
I'm Kayleen Devlin, and this is the documentary with BBC Trending. Pyotr G., the man behind the banner, was charged with publicly calling for the initiation of an aggressive war against Ukraine and praising an aggressive war against Poland and the public propagation of communist ideology.
I would be very surprised if he actually has to suffer serious consequences, but just the fact that the prosecution took up the case is significant and sends a clear signal to the Polish public.
This man faces serious charges, but can we find him? We put a call into the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, the same man who had warned of attempts to take over the country's agricultural protest by organisations or groups possibly under Russian influence.
Halo, halo.
Cześć Paweł, mówi Grzesiek Sokół.
Cześć.
Cześć. Słuchaj, ja dzwonię...
Grzesiek.
Cześć.
When I talked to the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry who had taken a position on this issue, there wasn't very much concrete that he was able to share with me in terms of specific clues that they might have or leads as to actual, involvement of foreign or Russian agents. But he definitely made it clear that local tensions and conflicts play into Russia's game and will be used, exploited very skillfully against Poland's allies, against Ukraine, and against Poland, and against the European Union.
Grzegorz set off to southern Poland, to the village where the photo was taken, to try and track down Pyotr.
None of the people involved in that protest wanted to talk to me. It was clearly because of the fallout from the banner, which went viral, and people have basically continued to refuse to speak to media and keep a low profile. But I was able to talk to another protest organizer. So the man who organized the neighboring protest just about 20 kilometers away in another village of Świerklany. He is another farmer and a protest organizer very involved in the current wave of protests. I spoke to him. His name is Grzegorz Wolny. He saw me at his home. He has a farm, also runs a little store, and is very active in protesting, has been since February. He made sure to repeat that the farmers are not going to give up and that they worry that they're fighting for their survival and for the for their farms, for their businesses.
Nie, tutaj myślę, że żadny rosyjski wpływ tutaj nie ma naszych.
He also was quite adamant about
Absolutnie
the protests having nothing to do with Russia or with any support for anyone. The farmers try to stay out of any sort of geopolitical context. He also heard about the banner on the tractor. He said he was quite shocked to learn about it.
This is the documentary from the BBC World Service. I'm Kayleen Devlin, and this is the documentary with BBC Trending.
I decided to just call local farmers and farmer organizations and the local municipalities to learn who the farmer was. I got the number.
Halo, halo? Dzień dobry panu.
Immediately after that, I tried to call Piotr, and I actually got through. He was driving. I could hear the sound of him driving in the background. He answered the phone. I introduced myself. I said I was working for the BBC, and we were wondering if he would be willing to speak to us. But the moment he, I think, understood what I was asking about, he hung up.
Halo, halo?
I was lucky to also have his wife's number that I got from the same source. They have a farm both on the Polish and the Czech side, and I tried to call the wife. She picked up. She heard me out. I explained what I was calling about, but she only said, "Who even cares about this?" and hung up.
Obchodzi, wie pani, bo powiem pani o co.
I find it quite surprising that his wife would say something like, who even cares about this?
I completely agree. I mean, I think the way I understood her answer was exactly that. I mean, she was saying effectively what I understood. Who even cares about his explanation? I mean, the case has already gone up, and blown up, and nothing will help it. So who even cares about what we have to say?
We weren't able to actually speak to Piotr, as he didn't agree to an interview. With the help of BBC Monitoring's Margarita Maliakova, we did track down his social media accounts. Early on in the war, you can see anti-Putin posts on his page, and in early 2022, he expressed concern for the death of children in Ukraine. None of this points towards any conclusive pro-Russian agenda. More than anything, it painted quite a confusing picture. Zagorz managed to get hold of someone who knows Piotr personally to try and find out a bit more about him.
He's from the next village over. I know this man.
This is farmer Łukasz. He's a Polish farmer and he attended the same protest as Piotr, the one where the image was taken. He spoke to Zagorz from his tractor in Zabelkov, where he was selling corn.
Everyone here works for himself. Everyone brought a banner with their own money, and those who didn't want to buy one made it themselves. In this case, he made one himself and, honestly, came on too hard. We were all sorry that it happened at our protests.
I don't
know why he did that. How it stands right now, with the farmer, I don't know. I don't want to gossip, but I think it was the farmer's desperation because from what I know he only grows corn, wheat and rape. And he was unable to sell the rape too. Nobody wanted to take it, and if they did, only for some miserable change. And I think it was an act of desperation which made him decide to write what he did on that banner.
We mentioned earlier in the programme that after the banner was released, there were claims that some involved in the protests may be acting under the influence of Russian agents. Whether this is the case for Piotr is not something we have been able to establish ourselves. Yet this did not stop this single image of one man and one banner building a divisive narrative online around the farmers' protests in Poland. We wanted to find out whether there are signs more broadly of pro-Russian activity involved in these protests.
Kiedy mówię o prorosyjskich kontach i prorosyjskich narracjach w kontekście protestów.
When I speak about pro-Russian accounts and narratives in the context of the farmers' protest, I mean those that align with the Kremlin's interests. They do not want Ukrainian grain to be transported or sold through Poland.
This is Anna Mierzynska. She's a disinformation researcher based in Poland. She told us that when it comes to the farmers' protests, they are seeing pro-Russian activity evolve in two directions.
One is the buttressing of the protests so that they advance and evolve in a direction that aligns with the Kremlin's interests. And the other is the direct participation of persons who we know to be associated with Russian interests in the protests themselves.
I'd seen for myself the social media posts of people involved in the protests pushing Russian narratives, but we also spoke to a group called Anti-Bot for Navalny. They're an activist group who have spent years monitoring pro-Kremlin bot farms on Platform X. Most of their research has focused on French, English, Ukrainian and German language bots. But since mid-April, they've noticed a new development, which is consistent attempts to reach Italian as well as Polish language audiences. One target of the Polish bots, as well as other European languages, was the farmers' protests. Yet while there may be an uptick of pro-Russian activity online targeting farmers' protests, Anna told us that activity can also be seen offline.
We see Polish citizens and individuals living in Poland actively disseminating information that is supportive of or affiliated with Russian interests.
She told me about a specific individual involved in the protests who'd also been photographed at an earlier date with the Russian ambassador. However, we don't have evidence of direct involvement from the Kremlin in Poland's farmers' protest movement. Here's Grzegorz again.
Well, I would say that it's clearly very visible right now, that there are quite strong anti-Ukrainian voices present at some of the protests. What I can see is that both in the case of farmers who are protesting right now, as in the case of truckers and transport workers last year, it's clear that there are significant structural problems. However, the narrative that takes shape on the ground focuses specifically on Ukraine. So there is clearly a politicization of that problem.
At the end of April, the European Parliament called for a firm response to counter Russian interference, following what they say were credible claims that some members of the European Parliament were paid to spread Russian propaganda and that several participated in the activities of a pro-Russian media outlet called Voice of Europe. Ahead of June's EU elections, we spoke to Vera Jourova, a European Commission Vice President who has spearheaded attempts to tackle Russian disinformation. She told us that investigations into these cases are ongoing.
They are ongoing in Belgium now, but I think that this case and the abuse of Voice of Europe, this just shows that there are many different ways how the Russians try to influence the public opinion. Russia needs proxies in the EU. The Europeans will not believe Mr. Putin directly speaking to them.
The Voice of Europe website featured interviews with multiple EU lawmakers, belonging mostly to far-right Eurosceptic parties. There's no evidence to suggest that all those appearing on the site were paid to do so, but their messages aligned with pro-Russian propaganda narratives, which included criticism of Ukraine, as well as the European Union's Green Deal.
Some of the politicians who gave interviews to the Voice of Europe said that they were not aware that they were in fact abused by the Kremlin regime. So also these cases which were disclosed should serve as lessons for all of us, not to be naive and to be aware that we might be instrumentalized.
When it comes to the farmers' protests, Vera urged caution on accusing specific farmers of being Russian agents or influenced by Russia. But she did add that protests like the farmers' ones are fertile ground for Russian meddling.
The farmers have a lot of reasons for protesting, and the problems which are born in the EU, in our member states. I suspect that in the online sphere, there is rather the effort from Russia to amplify this kind of anxiety and criticism from the side of farmers. We have to be aware of one thing, that Russia considers the disinformation as the military tool.
That's it from BBC Trending this week. Thanks to Gregor Sokol and Margarita Maliakova for their help in making this programme. This episode was presented by me, Kayleen Devlin. It was mixed by Hal Haynes and the editor was Flora Carmichael.